looking at the Maharal's treatment of nissim, and he was arguing that nissim are not a violation of divine order, that their natural order is just a subset of divine order. And some things could happen by natural order, and some things could defy natural order by fitting another order. And that way he avoids the problem that a lot of Rishonim have in Shmos, that if a perfect God creates a natural order, why does he ever have to meddle? And I had mentioned the Ramban's answer was simply free will meant that he relinquished control, so there are times he has to tinker to get things back on track. But the Maharal's answer is that no, there's a order to nissim. Miracles have their own order. And so there are laws of nature, just like there are laws of nature, and things are following a plan, even though the plan is not a natural plan. That's where we were so far, and he detoured into arguing with the Ralbag, which I decided not to get into because the question of what the Ralbag holds has achronim and academics with many, many opinions, and it just seemed like a very deep, very long and deep detour to go into to understand the Maharal, who I'm using as a foil to the Ran. So I'm gonna spend more time on the Ralbag to understand what the Maharal is rebutting, to understand what to hold up a contrast to the Ran just seemed like a little too far. So we skipped a whole bunch, and now we got to his discussion of empiric Eimat Midin. So in Avodah Zarah, the miracle where Yehoshua orders the sun to stop. So I want to go very quickly through the next few paragraphs because what I want to focus on is what the Maharal is doing rather than the details of the substance. In other words, I want to look at his methodology more than the content. So I'm going to try to rush through the content a little. Vayamod Hashemesh b'chatzi hashemayim v'lo atzlavo yom tamid. Right, the sun stood in the middle, at the half sky, being very literal because there's going to be machlokas as to what actually happened. V'lo atzlavo yom tamid, and it didn't resolve to move for an entire day. Kama hahu yoma. What is a day? Do we mean 12 hours? Do we mean 24 hours? Amar Yehoshua ben Levi, Chaf Dalet Sha'ot. 24 hours. Azil Shis, it moved for 6 hours, become Shis, and it stood for 6 hours. So it went from dawn to noon, and it stopped at noon for 6 hours. Azil Shis become Shis. It moved from noon and then stopped for 6 hours at Shkia. Kula Milsa Kiyom Tamid. The whole thing was like one day. Tamim. I'm saying Tamid. Tamim. This is not my normal nasal voice. I've been reading the word wrong. Rabbi Lezer Omer Talsin Vishis. 36 hours. Oh, so what happens is if you add 12 days, 12 hours to the usual daylight time, you have 24 hours of daylight time. Rabbi Lezer Omer Talsin Vishis, 36. Azil Shis become Tresar. It went for 6 hours and then stopped for 12. Azil Shis become Tresar. So when it says Lo Atzlavo Kiyom Tamim, it stopped for the full 12, which to me seems a little more literal. Hamida So Kiyom Tamim. So it stood still for a whole day. Whereas Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi is splitting the whole day into two halves. Rabbi Shmuel ben Achnaini Amar Arba'im Mitzimnaya, it's 48 hours. Azil Shis become Yebez. Azil Shis become Yebez. So it goes to noon, stops for 12 hours, goes to Shkia and stops for another 24 hours, 24, not 12. Shenemar v'lo atzlavo kiyom tamim. It decided not to move for a full day, like a full day. Mikal demeikara lav kiyom tamim. Therefore, telling you that the first time that it stopped was not like a full day. Iba yema. So there's a second version of machlokas. But Tosefes pligi. They're arguing about how much additional hours there were. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi Amar Chaf Dalid, Azil Shis become Yud Beis, Azil Shis become Yud Beis. Now Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says each time it stopped for 12 hours, 12 at noon, 12 at sunset. Amidaso Kiyom Tamim. And therefore, it's the total stopping time was like a full day. Rabbi Lezer Amar Shloshim B'Sheish, 36 hours. Azil Shis become Yud Beis, when for 6, stop for 12. Azil Shis become Arba Esrim Parba. And then it makes it to sunset where it stops for 24 hours. Floetz Lavo Kiyom Tamim. Same argument, except now it's the stop time without the motion time. Rishua Nachmeni Amar Arba'im Mitimnaya. 48 hours it stopped. Azil Shis V'kam Esrim V'arba. Azil Shis V'kam Esrim V'arba. Each time it stopped for a full 24. Below, and there we lost all the playing that I did with the what's it called is gone. Okay. Second, we got to find the place again. Okay. Makish Amidasola BSO. So it compares how long it stands to how long it's coming. Ma biasokium tamim afamidasokium tamim adkan. Just like as it came for a full day, it also stands for a full day, and that's the end of the Gemara. Bior chachamim chachmei talmud davar nifla. So now he's going to explain what the chachamim just said. They said something amazing. Sheya neis hazeh shalamidas hashemesh mesuder min Hashem yisparach b'seder haroi. The standing of the sun for Yehoshua was set up by HaKadosh Baruch Hu in an appropriate arrangement. This is what we were talking about last time we met, that he believes that miracles have to follow laws of miracle. That's why he's calling this a Seder. They're arguing about what the appropriate law of miracle should be for the sun standing. Why did the sun stop at noon in the middle of the sky? The sun has one motion until 6 hours. It's going upward. Because until then, the sun increases, continues to go up. I mean, the fact that this is only from our perspective will be discussed. There are no puzzled looks here. He will discuss this. He'll highlight that point. And from noon, it starts going down. And therefore, it's a little bit like the end of a motion in the middle of the sky, the transition from going up to going down. And therefore it's between the borders. Like it reached the end, the culmination of a motion. Even though it's all continuous, the motion of the sun, from the perspective of the Ofek, the dome of the sky, from where you're standing in the valley, it's going up from half the, until the middle of the sky. And then the sun starts to descend. Because of this, therefore, that's an appropriate place for the sun to stop for 6 hours. All of the motion of the sun in its orbit, actually, he means sphere, because gravity and orbits aren't really his language. Because it just moved for 6 hours from sunrise to the middle of the sky. But his chilaredes, and then starts to descend. Kilu kol chatzi yom shalechet mazricha shemesh ad emtza shemayim. It's as though for all this time the sun is rising until the middle of the sky. Nechsheves omedes b'chatzi shemayim. It's like it's standing for for in the middle of the sky. Me'achashe behold ze'azman tnua l'sham. Since all this time it was moving to there. So the 6 hours of motion earns it 6 hours of rest. Similarly, from the middle of the sky until it descends is 6 hours. And therefore, the 6 hours it moved until sunset are the 6 hours that it stops at sunset. Elashkia, because for half the day it is moving toward the sunset. L'sham hidveka, and that's what it's attached to. If you do a kichol misno eldavar, anything that it's known that anything that moves to something, mitzura feloso davar shu misno love, has a connection to whatever it's moving to. So it's being drawn toward the end, and since it was drawn for 6 hours, it stops for 6 hours. לפיכך, מאחר שהשמש היא מתנועת אל אמצע השמיים 6 שעות, מן אמצע השמיים עד שקיעה בתנועה 6 שעות, since it went up to the middle of the sky for 6 hours, and then it went down from the middle of the sky to sunset for 6 hours, לכך היא מצורפת מדובקת לשם כל אלו 6 שעות, therefore it is attached and connected to the place for the same length of 6 hours. As though it's there for that tzira, for that connection. Therefore, when the sun reaches the middle of the sky, or to sunset, it stops for 6 hours. If it moves for 6 hours, it was drawn to it for 6 hours, and that stoppage is therefore also 6 hours. Amna Rabbi Lezer sover ki b'shkia amda shnei masar shaos. Why does he say that at shkia it stopped for 12 hours, not 6? Because he's saying that it's all one motion from the east to the west, from sunrise to Velominayim Tashmaim, and not from the middle of the sky. Rak misha sheshemes matzchalo lizroach ad hashkia, just from sunrise to shkia, tamid hu misnoas el mavoa. It's still going to its destination. L'kach timshach el shkia shnei masar shaos. Therefore, for 6 hours it stopped in the middle of the sky. That part he skipped, and then when it reaches shkia, it was moving to shkia for the full 12 hours. L'kach hi emshech hamada sham. Where am I? That's why I'm not even in the right paragraph. L'kach kasher higia shemesh al emtza shmayim b'chein el hashkia amda sheishalos ki emtza shmayim b'chein shkia. Oh no, we did that already. No, I was in the right paragraph. Kach tam shechal shkia shemesh reishaos, right? L'kach hayam shachash amada sham shnei mesrei shaos. So he's saying it's 6 hours to noon, but it was a continuous motion from east to west for 12 hours to sunset, so the sun earned a 12-hour rest at sunset. Rabbi Shmuel ben Achmeni sover ki roi she'tia ha'amida be'emtza shemaim shnei masar shaos. Why, according to Shmuel ben Achmeni, did it stop for 12 hours at noon? Lefi she'shemesh misnoes memakom shehu begalgala tachlis hamata, because he's counting from midnight. So midnight to noon, it was moving toward the middle of the sky for the last 12 hours, AM and PM. It's going up the entire AM. Lekach hatenua elem tishmayim shnei masar shaos. That was a full 12 hours. Fichach omda shemesh sham shnei masar shaos. B'shkia above esrim shows k'miyad shetishka shemesh chozeres l'shuv v'lachdar malkum avoa, because it's as soon as the sun sets, it's going back to the opposite end of the under the earth, at the opposite end of the orbit. L'kach hayeh shama midas shemesh above esrim shows. Therefore, the sun stopped for 24 hours. Lefi shekasher shaka shemesh nigmar hayom. When the sun goes down, that day is over. V'yom achar mastil, and the next day begins. Umitchilas hashemesh betnua lachzav v'lo shuvel mavoa. And when the sun goes back to its destination, but and people who understand this understand this. Lilishna betosefes pligi. I know I said I'm going to run through but I really want you to experience what he's doing here. What he's doing here is very, very. He's trying to understand each process in terms of how the sun's motion looks to the observer, and the fact that the sun was drawn to noon for, let's say, 6 hours or 12 hours is why it stops for 6 hours or 12 hours. So A, there's a rule and a pattern to this, and B, the rule and pattern has to do with the observer. That's, I think, the main point of all this math. He's going to do all this math because it's important to him to work out. But what I want to focus on is why it's important, not the actual math. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Haisa Kol Amidu Amindia Shnei Masar. So according to the second version, each time the sun stopped was 12. Because AM is 12 hours, right? From the bottom of the sky, on the opposite end of the earth, to noon is 12 hours. Right? From the lowest point to the highest point. Shefelusa, right, from its lowest, it's ascending to the height of the sky. And therefore it stopped for 12 hours. The AM is 12 hours, it stops for 12 hours. And therefore also for Shkia it's 12 hours. Because then we're not looking at how long it took to reach the height. We're looking at how long it took to reach the west, which is also 12 hours. Lamanda Mashloshim B'Sheish, the one who said 36 hours, so over Kitakles Hamita, Yesh L'Shemesh B'Galgala, the lowest point that the sun has in its orbit, Shu B'Chatzi Alayla, which is at midnight, Adro M'Galgala Shnei Maser Sha'os. So from midnight to noon is 12 hours, that we just said. Aval b'shkia roi lamod esrim ba'arba. Shkia, it's worth stopping for 24. Shkia miyad chazeres l'sov b'galgala. Hachitachu shenis el beis movoa. Because at Shkia it immediately goes now to where it started. L'kach b'makom shkia so nimshach esrim ba'arba shows. Therefore, it should stop for 24 hours. I think this is related to the idea that the day starts at Shkia. So at Shkia is the end of the trip, and therefore the sun stopped as long as the trip. Laman Damar Arba'im Bishmona, the one who said that it was 48 hours, Sover Kishneim Akamos Minagalgol, Chanu Emsa Shmayim. Shnei Mikamos Minagalgol, the 2 points in the orbit when the sun stopped. Dahainu Emsa Shmayim, which is the middle of the sky, became Shkia, and also at sunset, at the west. Echad Kamo Sheni, they're both the same. Kamo Shat Omer, Shemiyad, Sheshaka Shemesh, Chozeres Lushul, Begalgala, Achetavos Leves Mavo Shenis, until it goes back to its origin. Lakach Omda Mimakom Hashki Esrim Barba shows, therefore, at sunset, it stopped for 24 hours. In other words, because the orbit is a circle, every point in the orbit is the end of 24-hour trip since it was there last. So both times it should stop 24 hours. V'chein kasher taskil lasov v'nemtza shemaim ad chazeres hapam shenis esrim rabba shows. Similarly, from the when it starts moving from the middle of the sky till it reaches the middle of the sky again was 24 hours. Therefore, in the middle of the sky, it stopped 24 hours. Shows each time 24 hours. What they're each doing is they're trying to get how the orbit, how people associate the sun with noon and with sunset. Do we feel like noon is the end of a half a day's motion, the end of the motion of the sun ascending, even though we only could see half the ascent, or the end of the full orbit, and therefore it's 24 hours. And that's how you get 6, 12, and 24. You have the same argument at the end of the day, except at the end of the day, there's more reason to say it was a full orbit because it's the end of the day. Or it's more reason to say 12 hours because the sun went from east to west. Klala davar. And this is really the point, right? I mean, he says this is the point. Rabbeinu Zichronim Levracha, Chazal, Pirshu Bazeh, explain this. Ki haya inyan hazeh mitzuda lafia inyan aroi. They all went according to the appropriate logic. Ad she haya hanes mitzuda legamre. That the miracle had an order to it. It wasn't like a poof and there was no logic to it. And because the nays had a order, a rule, there is a preservation of that which exists in this order, even though it was not the natural order. This is I think one of the highlight paragraphs. Like what got me excited about his idea here is this paragraph. Ulai im yomar shagagal hu kaduri. If you're going to say that the orbit is a sphere, right? The galgal that's embedded it, right? Or we would say the orbit's a circle. So how could you even talk about a beginning and an end? Like any other circle or sphere. There's no beginning or end to a sphere. Yes, that's true. Still, it's known every star it does something different when it's in a different place, whether it's rising or setting. When it's in the middle of the sky. This is well known. And if you're going to say that this is from the perspective of a human, that it is, in relation to where I'm standing, that the sun is going up or going down. But in terms of the actual physics of the orbit, of the sphere, there is no rising or setting. I'm saying that also. Since to a person, the sun in its orbit, has a rising, a setting, and a noon. So therefore, these things which we explained, apply. So he's saying the order of miracles has a human perspective element to it. And this idea and this explanation forces you to say, you there, Ariel, because I referred to this once like a while ago when you asked me about Masa Bereshis and Noach's Teva. So this forces you to say that the sun only stood for Yehoshua and his nation. And the same, and all the people who were there with him in that location. Ushar b'nei Adam and rest of humanity, Haisat Tnuas Hashemesh Kedarka, the sun moved in its normal motion. V'zeh Yoser Hafla V'fela, and this is even more incredible. Hili Yehoshua v'amo bofekahu, Yehoshua and his nation in this place, Haisomedes, the sun stood still. L'shar b'nei Adam bofek acher holeches. And everybody else in the world, the sun continued moving. I don't mean that this was an illusion that the sun stood. Elamida Gemura, the sun actually stood for one group of people while moving for another group of people. Conflicting realities. What did Chazal say? The sun stood still at noon and at sunset. And that could only be for Yehoshua and his nation. This is why I think he spent so much time on this particular miracle and not pick like B'yis Yamsov. Because sunset depends on where you are. If you're in a different place, it's a different sunset. So if you want to say that there's a pattern to when the sun stops based on where it is in the sky, it could only fit a particular location and its sunset. Kasher Yadua, like everybody knows, sunset is local. And once you say that it's appropriate that the sun should stop in the place of sunset, but that was only shkia for the people in that place, Yehoshua and his nation. Therefore, you have to say that it only happened to the people for whom it was shkia for them, lo b'chol ha'olam, and not in the whole world. Amnam, now he's going to throw in a parenthetic comment. If you want to say that once it reached noon for where Yehoshua and his nation were standing, and that's where the sun stood still, then it stood still for everybody, as opposed to what he just posited. This is a havamina. He's going to throw it away in another few paragraphs. And that havamina would be if Hashem wanted his miracles to be known to the whole world. V'chein mashma b'medrash Bereshit Rabbah Tzadik Daled Daled al pasuk v'zaro hayihyeh malei goyim zroo hayihyeh malei goyim sheyeh nes nira b'chol olam. His name should be seen in the whole world. Gam zeh nachon, that's also correct. V'yisa hashemesh shelo b'teva l'chol olam. And then the sun would not have been in place for the whole world. Mikivin shelo hayazet TV, since it's not natural, rakal yedei nes, only by miracle. Lo yamar shenishtana teva shamayim. You don't have to say that the nature of the sky changed. Kivan shelo b'teva, because it wasn't natural. Did you catch what his point was before the parenthetic? He's saying that when a nes happened, it happens to the people of that place and time, and the rest of the world follows the natural order. So, for example, right, we were taught as kids that the water turned to blood, and it only turned to blood for the Egyptians, and for the Jews, it immediately turned back to water, and you gave it to the Egyptian, and immediately turned back to blood. The Maharal doesn't need to go there. According to the Maharal, it could very well be that the water was water in one universe and blood in the other universe. Because he doesn't need a nes to be consistent to all observers. So Rav Dessler, who tries to understand this after, at a period of time when Kant and Kantianism are hot topics, so he makes this all Kantian, right? What really happens, nobody understands, right? A person on a certain madrega is going to have a different phenomenology than a person on a lower madrega. So somebody who is, at a prophetic or near prophetic level will be imposing a different seder on his observations and therefore experience a different reality. That's the way Rav Dessler takes this. The Maharal wasn't going to invoke Kant because he wasn't going to let us know that he knew Kant was going to be born. That was kind of a joke, but okay. But in any case, I mean, the guy made a golem, right? So, like, why wouldn't he know that Kant was going to be born? But what's it called? This whole idea of a miracle being a different order, and B, a different order only for certain people, and other people are still living in the normal order, I thought was an incredible concept. And with it, you throw away every miracle question. Why is there no evidence of Yetziat Mitzrayim? Well, because natural order happened to everybody else, and we're everybody else. We're not on the level to experience miracles, so we don't see the evidence of miracles, right? Or the perfect one, the flood, right? Every culture has a memory of a flood, but there's no physical evidence. That fits the Maharal exactly, right? We have the testimony of the people who could experience miracles, and the people who didn't experience miracles, none of it, well, there were no people who didn't experience miracles, but we who aren't experiencing miracles see the universe as though it always ran naturally. And the fact that reality contradicts itself, he's okay with that.
I guess the thing is, as I've studied in the 19th century, there was a lot of things that people, the early geologists, thought was evidence, but it turned out to be evidence of the Ice Age, the striations, the glacial moraines. So they thought it was evidence, but now it's interpreted as being of the Ice Age.
No, that's somebody else.
And then, of course, then there's the idea of the local Mabul or the Black Sea incursion, if that's true. So
but none of that has to do with the Maharal's theory. I'm saying the Maharal's theory gives you a totally different out. I'm not sitting here to discuss every other possible way of addressing it. Right? I mean, yes, there's Gershon, what's his name? Talmud el-Chazon Ish, who talks about that everything from in Noach and Lech Lecha is the history of.
Different George says the Rebbe is Atzal.
Okay, could you please mute John if you're having a chat with your wife? Thanks. So that's the what's it called?
She's just talking. I'm not really having a chat.
Either way.
She's reacting to you, I think.
Oh, cool. So the what's it called? The Maharal is just giving another way of addressing it that I think is such a big chiddush in how to see how the world works, that you're not going to encounter it in a book on how to address science and the Torah. But there is a statement there. The statement is that miracles only happen for some people. And if we're not the some people, which, I mean, short of the 6-Day War seems to be true, then we shouldn't expect to see evidence of the flood, because we're not those people.
It just sounds like you see what you expect to see.
That is kind of the way Rav Dessler invokes an idea from the Alter of Kelm, that when you walk down the street, the shoemaker sees a bunch of shoes with people in them, and the dressmaker notices all the dresses, and everybody's reality is what they're focused on. right? Which is kind of what
Yeah.
he's saying, except that he's saying that this is actually what happens. In other words,
In which
if
case,
you
my theory of manipulation of probability being evidence of Hashem doing stuff could be as meaningful as anything else. You know, if Hashem is gonna manipulate probability to say, you know, all the Brownian motion of all the molecules in Yam Suf are gonna all suddenly go over there. You know, okay, it's like it's like Douglas Adams, the infinite probability drive.
right. So that's closer to like the Ramban, right? Who says that
Yeah.
every miracle is within the laws of nature,
Mhm.
and right, and just some of them are hidden, and some of them are just incredibly improbable. But
Yeah.
what's it called? But usually, what we call natural is the law of large numbers holds,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And unnatural is when the law of large numbers and therefore entropy doesn't hold. But
Yeah.
Rav Dessler's but the Maharal's going in a different direction. Maharal is just saying that that there's there are people for whom miracles happen, people for whom miracles don't happen, and therefore the same reality could be therefore the same event could be experienced in conflicting ways by different people.
Well, that's what I was, sort of what I was. That's sort of what I was saying. You know, I see this thing as evidence that Hashem approves of my being more kosher. You see it as, oh, it's a coincidence. I mean, that's a
No. He's not saying that. He's saying something closer to what I said about the water and the blood. Right?
mm,
It's not, oh, I'm giving this, like the 6-Day War couldn't have happened without God's intervention, or could have, you come up with excuses that it could have, right?
yeah,
This is actually blood is blood, water is water,
yeah,
right? It's different
hmm
realities altogether, right? Or his
yeah,
example, right? Never mind my example, his example, right? To people who weren't in that war, the sun never stopped.
yeah. Ah, okay.
It's not the sun stopped and now we have one explanation or another explanation, right?
Mhm.
To me it seems natural, to you it seems like beyond the limits of rationality to say it's natural. We're
That
actually
sounds.
talking about different experiences.
Yeah, that sounds like it falls back into the Rambam's thing of any experience of an angel is just a vision. So this is a vision that happened as a mass
No,
hallucination for the people in that war.
he explicitly says this is not an illusion. He
I'm not saying illusion.
says
I'm saying a mass hallucination. This is what these people believe happened, and it
no,
happened
but
for
he
them.
explicitly
But
says it
it
really
didn't happen to
stopped.
anyone else.
Nope, he explicitly says it really stopped. He says, don't think that it looked like it stopped. It actually stopped. He is very
Huh.
clear that he's positing conflicting realities,
I mean,
not
is
conflicting perceptions of reality.
is this I mean, I've seen some stuff about quantum entanglement and the observer reality exists only when there's an observer. I wonder if that sort of thing is.
Well, I saw a booklet that explained this Maharal using relativity as a mashal. The two people in two different frames of reference, right, have different ideas of what's synchronous, right? To this person, it's this length. To this person, it's that length. This person, A happens before B. To this person, A happens simultaneous with B, right? So you see that there's a observer dependence on your actual experience of reality. So he used that as a mashal. I don't know if he meant it as a mashal. It was a very cheaply printed. It was more of a tract than a kuntrus. He could have actually believed that he was arguing that the Maharal presaged the theory of relativity. I don't really know. It was whatever, but That was my first. That was what drew me to see what he actually said inside.
Yeah, the Rashba presaged Bayesian probability, but
Mhm.
and try to explain things like Rove and Chazak and whatnot.
Right. Well, maybe, or maybe he wasn't talking about probability.
Mhm.
Maybe Rove is not a statistical concept, but because the second you get to hold it
When you get,
parish,
because if you, yeah,
statistics
but
don't
when you do,
matter.
yeah, except that when you do talk about when you go to Sveka, you're basically multiplying the probability to the point where it's improbable. If this is fake,
Right,
if this
except
is math
according to
on
the
math,
Rambam, who
this is
says
math
fake Sveka is
you
only.
multiply them, then it's
Uh,
only a quarter possibility, and so it's okay.
yeah, okay. There are other problems with fake Sveka, like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
second you start involving so each suffix has a rove, you could get to under half, and yet you still have to be machmir. Right? I mean, if you
Yeah.
have 2/3 and 2/3, right?
Hmm.
Right? You multiply the
Yeah.
two, what do you get? Or 51%
Yeah.
and 51%, you have
Yeah.
two roves. I mean, 51% is not
Yeah.
really rove, but you understand what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The other problem you have is that
Rove,
I
you're
was
right.
saying, yeah, no, the Rambam says that fake only works because the first suffix is l'chumra d'Rabbanan.
Okay.
So the second suffix is suffix d'Rabbanan
Hmm.
l'kula.
Yeah.
Right, that's his explanation
Hmm.
of Sveka, nothing. And the Rambam explicitly makes it very far from statistics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, the
The
one place I remember seeing the one place that I thought quantum entanglement came in was like in Corbanos. But
I hear.
you offer this bird, you have a pair of birds, you offer this bird as a chatas. Instantly the other one is an ola, even though it was indeterminate
Right.
until you offered the first one.
I hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although the truth is I mean,
Yeah.
in Bayesian quantum mechanics, right? BQ, um, that it's the same thing as you have two coins, and when you open one hand and you see one's a nickel, you see the other one's a dime. Okay.
Yeah, but it's a dead
Anyway,
dime.
yes. Anyway, well, it's half that. Um, Okay, so anyway, I thought that this was an incredible concept about how miracles work. That it's
Yep.
and the relationship I saw to the Ran was that the Ran was saying that having the Torah and being connected to what he calls Masa Bereshith, right? The why that goes above physics is what makes miracles possible. And he's saying that there are, right. In other words, would the Ran therefore say that if somebody is standing in the same room as somebody who is looking at the world from a Masa Bereshith perspective would have experienced nature? Would he have agreed with the Maharal about conflicting realities? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I raised this and to raise the question. I didn't raise this because I had an answer. Oh yeah, this is what I was telling you, John. Lo shal said nira omedes ella amida omedes ella amida gemura. So he's definitely saying that there's two realities, right? It fully stands, but only fully really stands in one place, and not on the rest of the planet.
Uh-huh.
Well, let's go on and see more detail. V'chein masha amar od the echi tachein, and this which the Ralbag says further, because remember that's the deleted context. So when it says Amar, that's the he. He echi tachein sheyi yashinui bigramim shemimiyim. How could there be change now in the celestial causes? Okay, he can't. The Rambam made a long argument that nature can't change. And if you're going to say that it's above nature, how could the above nature cause change? He he's working with givens that don't even start, right? What he's laying down, as its first step, just it it doesn't nothing. I mean, like he's on the wrong planet. Things don't start that way. Never mind the rest of the argument. Bine hara amal v'yaled sheker. Okay, he put in a lot of work and gave birth to falsehood. Right? He went through labor pains. Is that a good definition of hara amal? V'yaled sheker. How could you say that the spheres have some intellectual influence? So don't tell me that's from heavenly causes, because the heavens don't have causes. Right? He's throwing out astrology. He's throwing out that whole idea that the spheres are intellects. Razal Balia Emes, Chazal, who know the truth, Omrim Hefech, say the opposite. Yoshua mamim shemesh. This is why Yoshua could make the sun stand. Because sun is physical. Yoshua shayilo haTorah sichlis. Yoshua, who had the intellectual Torah, limshol aleha. So seichel is primary to Gashmius. Sun is just a physical object like the earth is. And therefore, somebody who has the Torah and has the truth could control the sun. This is that Medrash Techumen. This is how he's going to explain a Medrash that I don't know. I think I heard it in elementary school. Amar lo Hashemesh. The sun said to Yehoshua, Plum katan amar legadol hemenu dom. Yeah, come on, look at me. I'm how many light seconds across? You're what? 2 meters? Who are you to tell me to stop? I mean, really. Ani nevresi b'revi. I was created on Wednesday, but nevresi b'shishi, and you were created on Friday. Batamar le dom. You're a little pitzer. Come on. Who are you to tell me to stop? Amar lo Yehoshua. So Yehoshua says to the son, who's apparently a she, Ben Chorin Katan, a freeman who's a child, sheyesh lo eved zakein, who has an old man as a slave. Eino omer lo shtok. Can he order the slave to shut up? Lo kana Avram Avinu shamayim v'chol ma shebetocho. Didn't Avram Avinu acquire the heaven and everything in it? I don't understand this proof at all. Shenemar Baruch Avram lekel elyon konei shamayim va'aretz. Apparently, he's reading this pasuk as blessed be Avram to the God above, the Avram who acquired Shemaim and Aretz. That's the best I could do. But it's a midrashic take, so it doesn't have to be shot in pasuk. Lo zu bilvad, not this alone, elishnishtach viska eved lifnei Yosef. You already bowed before Yosef like a servant. Shenemar v'hinei hashemesh v'hayorech v'charag aser kochavim mishtachavim li. So you see, the son already bowed to what's it called? The son already bowed to Yosef, to an ancestor. Bereshis Rabbah, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Lo, Avda Bisha, Zivinta Kasba da Ata. You're just, dad's property. Shenemar, Vinei Hashemesh v'yirech v'chatzar kochavim mishtachavim li. Adkan. The truth is, usually in midrashic whatever, the son is masculine. And that fits the Zohar's whole idea that the provider is masculine and the developer is feminine, which is a straight sexual reproduction metaphor and not necessarily a gender role metaphor, but it is a straight, you're right. So the sun is usually masculine and the moon is feminine. Moon's feminine anyway because it has monthly cycles, but whatever. I mean, usually we talk about the sun and right. Well, for that matter, in the pasuk we started with, it's Shemesh Begivon Dum.
Oh, the
So
Greek
language
students,
Yehoshua actually uses is masculine.
the sun god is male and the moon god is female, Artemis and Apollo, whatever.
Exactly.
Hmm?
Or Selena and Helios. Same thing.
Yeah, that's a good one. Jordy
Mhm.
points out Zarachat.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose I'm the Midrashic reading of the Melchizedek bracha would be some what they were worried about, what Chazal were worried about in terms of wording the Shemona Esrei and shoving the extra words in the middle of the pasuk there. You know, Kel Elyon Konei Shemayim B'Aretz. If they just did it that way, it would be that might lead to a
right, but they did do it that way.
no. They did that. That's the old wording that we say on Friday
Well,
night.
it's not older. I mean,
the new wording, which
Kel
Kel
Elyon Konei Shemayim Va'aretz was Nusach Eretz Yisrael all through the
Yes.
Gonim. So
Right.
it's older. It's newer than the Gemara. That's why I didn't understand why you're calling it.
Oh, okay.
word.
Yeah. Well,
Right. Ashkenaz gave it up when Seder of Amram Gon became like the way to daven.
Yeah.
But it's not. Yeah. I didn't understand what it meant by older and newer because I was thinking relative to Chasim Shas. But
there's thought that that the Ashkenaz wording may have been earlier, and whatever, but it's just may have been earlier.
I do think it's interesting that the language in the
language
Israeli
in the
version
is the way we all do it.
I think it's interesting that the wording in the Israeli version of Birchas Havos takes its wording from Avram. Melchizedek and Avram, but Avram. It's just, it seems more appropriate. But okay. It seems appropriate to call him, Kel Elyon Konei Shemayim Va'aretz when that's why he says the Melchizedek. That's all.
Yes, I know, but the the old Nusach, not a modern Nusach sort of thing. Okay.
Except we but we held on to it for Friday night. So okay. Hine Barozal. The Medrash, because the sun is a physical object. Lakach kara shemesh eved. Therefore, it's an eved. Kasher nispar pamim harbe meod ki chomer hu eved. Because it's explained many times that physical objects are eved, which, by the way, is a very solid metaphor. That the physical objects are servants, right? They're not actors. They're not subjects. They're objects. Right? Objects are objects, meaning it's the person with the will who decides whether they're good or bad, not the object itself. Lakach nikra gamkein ha'eved chamor, and this is why, because chomer is an eved could be called a chamor, with the usual donkey substance pun put in there. K'dechsiv, like it says by the Akedah, shvulachem poim ha'chamor, sit here with the donkey, Am Hadom el Chamor, the nation that is like a donkey, because Canaan is an Eved.
Wow. Because it also sounds sort of like some of the stuff that's been coming up in the DAF recently, which I only know because Debbie's been doing the DAF and talking about it. That an Eved is like a movable chutzner.
Or it's like land. They weren't sure.
They weren't, yeah. Or
Well,
it's like
acquisition.
land.
A lot of the laws of Kenyan of an Eved are more like land than a metaltalin.
Yeah.
Okay. Ve'ein ben chorim rak haseichel. The only thing that is free is intellect. Lefichach omar shu Eved, and therefore the Medrash calls the sun an Eved. Ki Avram asher hu hayakulo seichel, Avram, who was entirely, subject to thought and wasn't prone to just following bodily urges, physical urges. Lo haya mi shaya lo malas haseichel kmo shaya la Avram. And there wasn't anybody who was like intellectual like Avram. I think this, I wouldn't take this too strictly because I'd ask the Maharal, well, what about Shlomo? Shebishvil kach amru kiyam Avram Avinu mechachmaso afilu eruvei tashilin, and that's how they were able to say in Yuma that Avram figured out the whole Torah and was able to even keep erev tavshilin, which is drabanan. But that's no sinkach, and the mind, whatever it fits well. Shehu hayatchila shehikara emes. He was the first person to actually recognize the truth, right? He invented this Judaism thing. Shekodim l'chein hayutolim achar dimyun. Before that, they were misled by appearances. Me'az hikiru baro, and from him on, we recognize the Creator. Vamdo ala seichel, and they stood by the intellect, by what made sense. Al kol olam. Therefore, they rode on the whole world. Like it says at length, and we'll make them ride on a donkey and go see in Shmos. Therefore, Hashem gave Avram and his descendants the entire physical world. And when he says the Olam HaChomri, he's including the sun and the moon. The physical is subservient to the intellectual. Umoshel alav, and the intellectual rules over it. And that's how Yehoshua ruled over the sun and the moon. But al tashgiach b'divrei philosophem, don't bother with the philosophers. Shamru ki hashemesh v'yirei chayim misichlim, that they have their own intellects. The Rambam, he was totally off. Shekol davar zeh havai. It's nonsense. V'chein masha shemesh ishtachaveh lifnei Yosef. Similarly, the sun bowing before Yosef. Hayazeh gam came ki Yosef hayamaloso niftal minayin hagufaniyim. He was also above the physical, right? That was his level. He was above the physical. Like we're going to explain at length, and that's why the whole story with Ashes Potiphar is so central, because he rises above physical temptation. Shebishvil kach amru, the Mechilta, therefore the Mechilta says, Bishvil atmos Yosef nivkayam. That's how Yosef's bones had the power to make the sea split. Kamoshe Yispire. Oh no. Where are we? A Kamoshe Yispire lakaman bezos Hashem klala davar. Sheyesh la'adam. So again, we're going to get out of the weeds into the big principle. Sheyesh la'adam atzadik mala yoser min hashemesh. A tzaddik has a greater level than the sun. Kinishmaso nifdelos min hachomer, because his soul is separated from the physical. Bilu hashemesh ikar malas hashemesh kashmis, and the sun, the ikar level of the sun is still a physical level. She etzem gashmi. It has a physical essence. Ubishvil shekol ma'alasa gashmis, because its entire level is physical. Imishubedes l'seichel, it is subservient to the intellect. So the sun, even though it's bright and it's a nuclear reactor and all that, it is still inferior to a seichel. Lefichach lo hayarocha keitel rasal. Therefore, it wasn't wasn't foreign to Chazal. Shetiya omedes hashemesh letzadikim kmo elu, that the sun would stand for a tzaddik like this. Ki dazaver zeh gorim, because this is the cause. Shachomer mishuba l'sechel v'nivdol, because the chomer is subservient to the intellect and that which is separated. Now that explains the sun for Yehoshua according to the truth. It all literally happened. The next topic is going to be, did it really happen only in one place or to the whole world? Remember, I told you he was going to reopen that Hava Amina. So that's the amazing Maharal. And you buy it.
I mean, I like the idea that miracles can affect people differently at the same time. Like that sounds fascinating. Like the idea that people always imagine the details of Dam in Mitzrayim, like you were saying before, where you would have like one cup with a Mitzri and an Ivri drinking out of straws from the same cup, and half the liquid is water and half of it's blood. But he's saying no, all the liquid can be water and be blood at the same time for each of those people.
Right.
That's fascinating. I'm just having trouble conceiving of how that works when time is different for different people.
Although time being different from different people is actually physics. I'm just playing with the booklet that introduced me to this Maharal. I mean, I'm not,
Form that collapses into water. It's a waveform that collapses into water or blood. Schrodinger's.
Well, no, because Schrodinger's cat is either alive or dead once one. Well, actually, that's an interesting question. Now you get into Werner's friend, right?
Sounds like this vector never collapses. It's just perceived differently.
Or or what you think is a collapse is actually related to your own perception, right? Like kind of like a multiple universe theory. It looks like it collapsed because this version of you matches that version of the cat. But there's multiple versions of you, then it all just spreads out. It just, right? They all exist in parallel. But he's not saying that. I mean, this is closer to that, I think, because he's saying that, each observer has their own reality. The problem, the advantage, I think, of Rav Dessler getting all Kantian is that it means that we're not dealing within physics. Right? His whole point is that there's an order beyond physics. Right? So once you get Kantian, the reason why physics works is because that's the order our minds, like, Einstein and Ernst Mach, the guy with that they named the speed of sound after, had this problem with the reasonableness of nature. Like how it is that it fits our math and the way we think. And the Kantian answer to that is because we're the ones putting patterns on it. We don't, what's really going on is incomprehensible. And the little piece that we can make any sense of, or not even make any sense of, the little piece that, when we start understanding it, we're already casting it into our images and our, right? So science is actually not really subjective, but it's as much about the human condition as about what's out there. Science is how what's out there impacts the human condition, not what's out there, because what's out there is unknowable. And that's where you get into the numinous and the phenomena versus the noumena, right? Noumena is what's really out there, which is not knowable, and science studies phenomena, which is how the not knowable is experienced by people. And therefore, it makes sense that it fits the way people think, because how people are perceiving that what's out there is part of what is the entire topic. It's not what's really out there. And whatever. I
Sounds like
mean, we'll
what
call it
sounds like an
evolution, call it the Ribono Shel Olam. The people who came up with this theory would call it evolution. That's why I started there. You're not going to have a reality. You're not going to have a perception of reality that doesn't work, because
that
you won't
Kantian view
survive.
sounds like it collapses back into Plato's cave.
Yeah, well, it is kind of
Yeah,
like Plato's cave,
there's,
right? There's more reality
there's
than
a
we could. Yeah.
yeah,
Um.
just a projection of what we
Right,
can perceive.
but the problem I have with the physical Mishalim is that it makes what the Maharal is saying about being able to go beyond the natural and describing it as part of the natural. Right? He's saying the natural order exists, and somebody could reach a point where the supernatural order exists. Right?
Okay.
And if somebody, to go back to Rav Dessler, if somebody were to truly believe that the world runs on justice more than it runs on gravity, truly believe that, right? Not just whatever, but right, he would experience a world that's more just than the law of gravity. Now, Rav Dessler's example is going to be very mussery. So his examples involve, interpersonal, things like justice, right? I don't know if the Maharal would go into justice as opposed to metaphysics, right? Like, he's casting it into the terminology of a Musarnik, right? So what's beyond nature? Midos, right? The Maharal was talking about theology, and the Rama and Avraham, who discovered the truth, who figured out all the mitzvos, right? He doesn't discuss the Avraham of Baal Chesed, right? Also, by the way, he may not have thought they were different topics. Like the whole role of subconscious and non-thought going into Midos is later. Like the people were aware of it, but until you start getting to Kant discussing Der Dunkel, the dark, or Freud or Rav Yisrael Salanter, people thought that your emotions followed the way you think the world works, and not you fit the world works the way your emotions go. But the point that I was saying about Rav Dessler, whether he casts them into more Midos terms than Maharal would have or not, is that he's saying that if you could get your worldview beyond the natural, you'd actually experience a world that's beyond the natural. Right? If you were the shoemaker, then you would actually live in a world that was full of shoes, not just your perception. It would actually be a world that's full of shoes, which makes sense to him because he's being Kantian, and what you put on the universe are the categories that you impose to understand the universe, and blah 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 blah. But the Maharal would simply say that if you're on a high madrega, then the world follows the laws of. If you understand the MS, then the world follows the laws of MS. If you only understand physical objects, then the world follows the laws of physical objects.